Well, good afternoon, everybody. We're delighted to welcome you here into the BCPR conference room. My name is Messi, and I'm the team leader for the results group. I want to welcome all of you, and particularly to the speakers who we have here. I'm delighted that we do have them because we have a very nice cross-section from the non-profit to the UN to the private sector. So I think they're going to give us a very good overall sense of how we can improve M&E. Certainly using a lot of the new ICT and social media that we have, and which are so important. I'm so glad there are more people coming. We've had this in sessions. We're working up in nice ICT sessions, I think. Maybe we should just give them a chance to
Thanks for saving us.
I know. Well, the person who's sitting there will come back. We have to deal with that.
Can you join the club? Sure.
Yes. Well, I guess this shows the kind of pressure the UN is under. M&E is to upgrade its whole M&E function to all the new available ICTs. So it's really great you're here. It is a new way of doing things. We're used to very heavy traditional evaluation policies and so on. So we hope that the whole use of ICT can give us much quicker, real-time information, hopefully improve the way that we manage our initiative, and certainly manage the way we monitor the impact on the environment that we are supposed to make a difference in. So having said that, welcome all the attendees. We'll try and cope with other people as they come. But I am going to pass it over to Linda Raftree, who's actually going to give us a general overview on the whole use of ICT for M&E globally, what some of the main trends are, what some of the main initiatives that she is aware of are. Before I pass it over to Giancarlo and to John, who will give us more specialized examples of how they view it. So Linda, it's really all yours, and welcome. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. This is exciting. I think there is a lot of pressure on all of us to do more results management and check our efficiency and our effectivity and all that. So what I'm going to present to you today is kind of a summary of a bunch of different events and work that I've been doing through something that we call technology salons. So we do them in New York City, usually about once a month, sometimes twice a month. And we look at the cross-section of technology and some particular aspect of development, and then we try and add like a third thing in, so it's not, like women and ICTs, because that's just kind of huge. But it might be, girls and economic empowerment and ICTs. So we try and kind of dig into a few specific areas. So we were doing them in New York City for about a year, and then we met up with the folks at Rockefeller Foundation, and they wanted to do some very focused ones around monitoring and evaluation and new technology, because Rockefeller's interested in innovations, and I've been working with their evaluation office on looking at who's doing what in ICTs and other types of innovation around M&E. So we did 3 salons in New York City, and then I was also able to attend the Evaluators Conclave in South Asia, as well as CRS, Capital Services, big ICT4D conference that they do every year. And so we've run sessions kind of like this in a number of different places to kind of get a sense of what people are doing with new ICTs and M&E, what are the challenges, what are the barriers, what are some of the successes. And so that's what I wanted to present to you today, just more of an overview rather than specific work that I've done myself on the ground using new tools with ICT, with monitoring and evaluation. So, see if I can figure out how to, okay. So some of the benefits, as we went through, sort of trying to collect what are people saying the benefits of ICTs are in this work. And one of the first ideas is you can collect more complete and more rigorous data. And sometimes that helps you save time and money because you can collect it more directly at the source without having to collect it on paper, and then take it to an office and have somebody digitize with all potential errors that can happen during digitization. You do something wrong, you have to go back out. So a lot of the newer tools that are out there can allow you to find some of those errors during the data collection process so that you can correct them on the spot or adjust on the spot rather than having to, go all the way back to the office and find out that you did something that wasn't complete. One of the interesting things, and this is actually something that Ian over there talked a lot about, was doing some interesting work on the post-2015 agenda, and was really talking about how M&E is not formal data collection anymore, that it's also combining all of these other sources. So, for example, UNICEF has a really interesting project called U-Report, where they have a series. I think they have some, I don't know if it's like 90,000 young people now. I might be exaggerating, so don't quote me on that. That whole bunch of young people that over a process of a long period of time of engaging young people, engaging partner organizations, now they have a slew of these reporters all over the country, and they can send them a text message and get this immediate feedback about what's going on in their communities, about how important a particular issue is to them, about what types of programs the Ministry of Health should be looking at, or are you using a bed net, or all these different questions that they're able to send out. It's not a completely simple process. It doesn't come back and like, yay, now we know everything, but you can sort of send these feelers out, and you can start to combine different kinds of data. That's not just a survey data, but that's all kinds of different information collected, not only from specific program and project beneficiaries, but also from a broader public. So those are some of the interesting ways that you can combine information sources. You can expand participation. We believe that most people in the world have mobile phones now. That's not necessarily true, but a lot of people do. So you can expand and broaden participation. And this idea of downward accountability, being more accountable towards communities where we're working and towards countries where we're working, rather than only upward accountability towards donors. Some of these new ICTs and the way that people are thinking about monitoring and evaluation, which I feel is somehow influenced by the way people use the internet. People are getting more accustomed to be able to feedback directly on things. They're getting more accustomed, well, I'm just going to create my own piece of information because no one's talking about what I want to talk about. So there's this kind of democratization in a sense. I understand it's not reaching everyone because we know not everyone has internet connection and not everyone has a mobile phone, but there's sort of a growing sense that people want to participate more and that people are having different expectations, and this downward accountability is a piece of that. Both being driven within organizations, but also being driven from the population in general. I talked about saving time and money, so that's something that everybody loves to know about. Return on investment. So there is a sense that you can collect, as I said, more accurate data, but there's also this idea of real-time data, where you can, rather than having your evaluation report that finally gets approved and you can see it 2 years after it was actually done, there are a number of ways that you can collect data and you can start to see what's happening, and that's really helpful for monitoring your different types of programs and projects. You can start to see things that, information that's coming in, and you can visualize it, and you can start to make better program decisions on the ground if you're doing a good job with that type of real-time data collection. Not I guess ICT isn't necessarily cheaper from the beginning, but once your systems get established and everyone's trained, and I'll talk about the barriers later to some of that, it can save you money and time in the long term. It's probably not going to be apparent up front, but in the long term, yes. Improved decision making that I mentioned, and then coordination and cooperation. So one of the big pushes with data collection right now is open data and shared data standards. So there's a lot of work going on about what's the data that I'm collecting in my program. Can that data be compared or shared with other people doing similar monitoring and evaluation or similar research, in the same country or on the same themes? And so there's a lot of work being done in terms of data standards, and there's also a lot of work being done around organizations trying to open their data and make their data, anonymize it, of course. And we're not talking about my personal data is going online, but how can you share your data in an open format so that it can be used by others and compared in other ways. And there's easier data auditing. So if you're collecting your digital data, it can be easier to go back in and look at that data and see where there are potential mistakes in that data, or if the data is open, other people can go in and look at your data and see where maybe they disagree with the way that you've interpreted it, and bring something else to light. And so that's also something that's quite interesting with open data. In terms of the barriers, there are a lot of them actually. Because M&E has a lot of its own barriers, and ICT has a lot of its own barriers. So when you combine, two fields that are very challenging, you get lots of challenges. But I think that's partly the interesting part of it. So I divided them into three areas, starting with the organizational level challenges. And I think the first challenge is a lot of organizations are saying, hey, let's use ICT, or we have a mobile phone, what can we do with it? Instead of saying, what's our M&E goal? What are we trying to find out? What are we actually trying to do? And then is there a tool that we can use to do it better? And if there's not, then let's not even talk about ICTs as far as I'm concerned. I don't think that they're not naturally going to just resolve everything. But I think that should be something that we always think about, and that at least enters into the equation. But it's important to start with the goals and to think about who the monitoring evaluation is for, because that's also going to determine the type of data you're collecting and the type of tools you're using. Are you collecting data for your country office? Are you collecting it for your donors? Are you collecting it because you want to feed it back to the community? All of that is going to depend on how you collect your data and the tools that you use, and who's collecting it and all of that. And then there's a difficulty in deciding on what is the right ICT tool for the situation. So once, and this is kind of a lot of times because the M&E people and the ICT people aren't working together, or they haven't crossed their skill set yet. And I think we're seeing a lot more cross skill sets. Over the past 5 years, you have people who know about ICT and who know about XYZ type of development field. And I think that's going to be happening more and more with M&E. But for now, those teams really need to work together with the program team, the M&E team, and the ICT folks. Because there are a lot of decisions to be made about tools. That if you're going to select a tool, there's a number of things you need to know about what you're doing before you collect the tool, so that you can estimate what your total cost is going to be in the long run. Because you might have this thing that's great and you use it for 3 months and you don't realize that, we have to update it every period of time, or it breaks all the time, or it's not actually collecting what we want it to collect. So there's a lot of work up front that needs to be done in terms of deciding the tool, and not all of us, myself included, don't necessarily have all the skills or know exactly all the right questions that we need to be asking to the different types of service providers that might have these tools that we could use. You have your typical ICT challenges: electricity, connectivity, cost, security, multiple language needs, etc., that are kind of inherent in every ICT project, and that of course translates into an M&E project as well if you're going to be using ICTs. Sometimes there's a focus on, too much of a focus on quantitative data collection and less exploration of other types of data or types of information that we can collect. So I'm really glad to hear about the video and the kind of multimedia stuff, because I think that's really an area that hasn't been explored enough. When we talk about ICTs, a lot of people are saying, okay, we're going to put a survey on a mobile phone. But there are lots of other ways that you can use ICTs in your M&E. And then one of the other challenges is not being selective about the data that you want to collect. It's kind of like when you got your digital camera, like you used to have only 24 pictures, so you took really quality pictures, and then you maybe, 10 out of those 24 were the ones that you blew up, to your 8x10 or whatever. And now you got your digital camera, and so you take 1,000 photos on your vacation, you put them all up on Facebook, and like nobody actually wants to see those 1,000 pictures. So we do the same thing with M&E data. If sometimes the head office will be like, oh, well, you have this tool now, you can collect all this data, and it really puts a burden on both your community members who have to answer these questionnaires all the time, and your frontline staff who are doing that type of data collection. If you're not going to use the data, then maybe you shouldn't collect it, or you should have a really good idea of what kind of data is relevant and useful, so that you don't overburden people with collecting too much data that's not going to be used. And then there's also, I think, not enough exploration of combinations of new tools and old tools. So there are a lot of existing M&E tools that are very useful that can continue on and can be maybe complemented or enhanced with ICTs. I don't know how I'm doing on time. There's sometimes staff resistance or resistance to change, so it really needs to be looked at as a behavior change situation, not just, hey, we have this great tool and everybody use it, but you'll have people who used to do other types of jobs. So for example, if you're working with people who used to have a big team that was digitizing, and now you don't need them anymore because now your data is going directly. It's already digitized. So what happens with all those people, or what happens to senior level staff maybe that aren't up on the ICT stuff? Do they feel threatened because you're using these new tools and they don't really have a handle on it? And so all these kinds of behavior changes need to be looked into when you start building in ICTs. And then women. Sadly, women are still often behind, both in our IT departments, both frontline staff using new tools and stuff like that. So there's a possibility of leaving out an entire half of the population if you're not very focused on making sure that women are included in these processes. There's another issue of tacking ICT and M&E on at the end of a project. I think we tend to do that, sort of like, oh, let's put 10% of the budget in for M&E. Oh yeah, put 5% in for some ICT, but what are we going to do with it? We have no idea. We're just going to put it in the project. We'll figure it out later. So this stuff really should be built in from the beginning, both your M&E as well as your the types of ICTs that you're going to need. Extractive data collection is also an issue that a lot of people have brought up in terms of not sharing data back with communities and just kind of collecting it and sending it up the chain rather than sharing that data back at community level. And what that does is that if you're just collecting data all the time, you have no idea where it's going, who's using it, what you can do with it, what it means, your data collection quality is probably going to go down, as well as it's just not really fair to just keep pulling things from people and sending it up that way. It really needs to be a full circle. Let's see. And then the attention to security and privacy. Because a lot of these tools are new, there's not enough discussion about what does privacy actually mean, and there tends to be sometimes this idea, they live in rural, Botswana or whatever, like they don't care what we do with their data. They don't even know, or they don't have those laws in their country, so there tends to be this sort of really ugly attitude around data privacy and data protection sometimes in this type of work. So I think that's something that we really need to look at more. What are the ethical standards around the information that we're collecting, what we're doing with the information, who does it belong to, and that type of thing. So there's some of the organizational challenges, community level challenges, motivation and incentive to participate. So you want me to send you an SMS every how often about what? Like, what do I get out of it? So really finding what the motivation and the incentive is for people to participate. And part of that incentive can be that they actually get to see what happened with their information and their data, and they see it making a difference. If I'm sending information in about, my XYZ isn't working, and no one ever responds, then, I'm probably only going to do that once or twice, and I'm going to be like, this is not worth my time. So there really needs to be responsiveness built in, and some type of return of the data to people. Again, you have cost, access, capacity, language, literacy, cultural barriers that are kind of inherent in any kind of ICT project that really needs to be looked at. So there are ways you can do community ICT or communications assessments, participatory communication assessments, to really understand what are the tools that people at community level have access to, how do they use them, what tools do people trust, what information sources do people trust, so that you're not just doing something just to do it. And then we talked about inclusion, so making sure that by using new ICTs, if you're doing a program where you're asking people to provide information on their phones, who are you leaving out? You're leaving out people, maybe women, people who aren't literate, people who haven't been involved in the project before, people who don't have a mobile phone. So really thinking about who's being left out if you decide to switch over to an ICT. The donor level, there's a lot of kind of dictating that we all have to use ICTs now, without regard to whether those are the best tools for the job. So really try to educate donors that, really be clear about what the goal is before you decide which tool you're going to use. And then this idea of M&E for whom and for what. Is it for donors? Is it for implementers? There's a huge obsession right now with maps. And people think, we did the map, we're done. For me, the map is the starting point. The map is where all your information goes, so that then you can start making decisions about what you're doing. So not sort of ending with the map, but starting with the map, or starting with the data, and then see what happens next. And then just very quickly, because I am just a couple minutes, so I guess just the lessons learned, and I'll send the presentation around about starting with the goal and not the technology. As I said, collect the right amount of data. don't only focus on the technology, but think about the people and the processes that need to be involved to make this all work. And also the sustainability and how you're going to pay for it, and that kind of thing. As I mentioned, inclusion is a huge issue with ICT, just because not everyone has access. So you really need to watch for that. One thing I didn't really mention before was supporting existing systems. So there also is a tendency to say, oh, government is so bureaucratic, let's just do something that people can tell us directly something, and really bypass existing structures. And that might get you stuff faster, but you also might be leaving key people out of the process. So really looking at how you're building and strengthening existing systems rather than replacing them with something that might not be sustainable. Sharing up, down, and across, so not only upward feeding, but all around, and then making sure that the data you're collecting leads to action and response at whatever level is relevant to the program that you're working on. So, and then I just had 2 resources that I thought were really useful, and I'll send you the links to those 2. This left one is out of the Clear Center. I'm not sure what Clear stands for, but it's they do a lot of work on M&E, so it's a really useful guide on the questions that you need to ask, and it has a list of some of the existing mobile data collection platforms that might be useful. And then the one on the right is by the World Wide Web Foundation, and they've done a series of 3 papers where they're looking at mobile data collection in sub-Saharan Africa, and there's a lot of detail in that one as well, so I'll recommend checking those 2 out. And that is what we have.
Linda, thank you very, very much. Very hard to summarize what you said, because you brought up so many interesting points so systematically. And I have to say, there were 3 I thought that you cannot just underestimate. One was, if you get producing data, you better know what you want that data for. I think in UNDP we have a storehouse of over 3,000 indicators that no one knows exactly what they're for, or what to do with the information generated by that. The other 2 were things we have definitely been grasping with over the past 18 months, and one is very much the need to focus on what exactly is the M&E need, and therefore what the best tool is, and certainly the partnership between the IT people and the M&E and program people. We have very unsuccessfully tried to design a new result-based software, which I think is so problematic that we have to begin again, so bear that in mind if you have to do it. But thank you again, and I'll leave the questions, I think, if that's okay, if anybody has them after the 3 speakers have given us their presentation. So